Hey friends, welcome back to Jesus the Legend. I'm really excited you're here today because I have a really special guest, Rod Williams. Now, Rod is a compelling speaker and writer with a passion to empower believers to know their true identity and live joyfully out of their present union with Christ, made possible by what Jesus accomplished through the cross of his grace. Rod has served in many capacities in churches over the years, including senior pastor at the Santa Cruz Church, senior coordinator at Cana Seminary, and alumni professor at School of Kingdom. He holds a degree in theology from Pacific Coast Baptist Bible College and participated in leadership training intensives at Bethel Church in Redding, California, Global Celebration, Jesus Ministry, and Global Awakening Ministries. Rod actually previously worked as an entrepreneur and consultant in Silicon Valley for 30 years, developing network computing technology and writing. So buckle up, I know you're going to be blessed.
Welcome to Jesus the Legend, a podcast exploring the profound truth that all Scripture points to Christ. From Genesis to Revelation, every story, prophecy, and promise finds its fulfillment in Jesus. Join us on this journey, discovering how reading through the lens of Christ transforms our understanding, deepens our relationship, and reveals God's redemptive plan for all of humanity. And now, here's your host, Ken Sullivan.
All right, Rod Williams, how are you?
Good, man. How are you doing?
Good. I'm so glad to actually get to chat with you. This is the first time we've actually, sort of been face to face, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've
How
been here. I'm doing really good, and your name has been popping up a lot lately. I don't know how the heck I missed your name for so long, but I hadn't heard of you for a long time, and then it seems like everywhere I look now, there's Rod Williams, and we're running in the same circles and everything, and I'm just so excited to get you on here because not only are you about inclusion and just the love of Jesus, but you're also open to the supernatural and the mystical, beautiful side of Christianity as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I have wandered through many many different paths on the way to Jesus and appreciate all the different aspects of the body of Christ, you know. And
Yeah.
often we lock into just one viewpoint or one community, one experience, and we kind of miss out on all the different colors of the body, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I'd love to start out with your story. I mean, because you've been around these circles like for a while. So I'd love to hear. I love testimonies. I'd love to hear your story. Like, how were you always raised in the church? Did you come to Jesus after, some radical experience, or was it just sort of you met him one day? And how did you get to where you're at? I know that we could probably spend 6 hours on that, but I'm just going to give you the floor, and wherever you want to go, you just go.
Okay. Well, one of the things about I've been around a while, so I've had quite a few experiences. Um, I was sharing with somebody the other day, like I grew up in a small town in the South, and this would have been, gosh, late 50s, early 60s, and so God was more a part of everybody's consciousness. Church was a thing that everybody was familiar with, right? And so one of my, I was thinking about this, actually started writing some things about this, but one of my earliest memories is we lived in one of those kind of like inexpensive houses they used to call shotgun houses. If you know what that is? It's a
Never
house
heard
where,
that term.
well, it's like a sharecropper, low cost thing, in the South
Yeah.
where they would build a house with the front door and the back door aligned, and then there'd be like a kitchen, living room one direction, and then a bedroom's the other. And it's called that because you could fire a shotgun from the front door and it would go out the back door and not hit anything. That's what that comes from.
Yeah.
And pretty I wouldn't say we were in abject poverty, but it was not exactly high living in those days.
Yeah.
So my earliest memory, I was thinking about this, about the evolution of how I perceived God. And I think a lot of people can relate to this. It was like my parents were aware of God, certainly believed in him. We'd go to church from time to time. Um, but what we understand of the gospel today, was not part of their consciousness, I think. But one of my earliest memories is back in those days, you had wood burning stoves was the heat,
Yeah.
the big cast iron pot-bellied stoves. And they would kind of, when you walked into the room, they would kind of radiate. You could feel them.
Hmm.
It was quite the presence. And so I had this early memory as a toddler of kind of, you know, looking around the room and everything's about, the coffee table's like this tall, right? Or maybe a
Yeah.
little, I'm tiny and I can feel that heat. And your parents would just, they drill it into you. You do not touch that stove, right?
Yeah.
And so, but I'm wandering around and we had one of those big family Bibles, that's the kind that's about, gosh, 5, 6 inches thick, right?
Oh, yeah. You'd write everybody's weddings and anniversaries and their baptisms and all that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so on the cover of that was this picture of Jesus. And it was that picture where he has kind of the long flowing hair. Of course, it's white Jesus.
Right.
But what a shock to find out he had a little color in him later on
Right.
in life, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
But anyway, and there was this luminous glow about him. I don't know. I should pull that up when I talk about this. But
Yeah.
most people have seen that picture, right? And his eyes were like this luminous, kind, loving. It was a really good painting, right?
Yeah.
And so I remember looking at that and thinking, gee, that looks like a friendly, welcoming, loving face, and I probably felt something like we all do of the presence of God, right?
Hmm.
And my mom was that presence of God. She would look at me the way that picture was, you know what I mean?
Wow.
And so
Yeah.
and probably everybody's mom looks at their child that way, right?
Yeah.
So I was thinking that's probably my earliest kind of grasp of the the love of God, the character of God, right?
Hmm.
And so I remember a little bit later going to church in this small town, and they had those very uncomfortable wooden pew seats, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I can still, that's one part of that memory. And I'm a little older, but so I remember looking around the room, and it was one of those where they had the scoreboard about the attendance last week and the baptisms that year and all that. And so there
Yeah.
was a little bit of, I guess in church we keep score some way or other, you know what I mean? That's seems
Yeah.
to be part of it.
Yeah.
And then um, all these, it was during the transition from these pot-bellied wood stoves to kerosene or gas or other kinds of heaters, right? So I remember also looking around the room and feeling warm. It was winter, and but I didn't see one of those pot-bellied stoves. And as far as I knew, that was the only way you got warm, right? Was you had one of
Hmm.
those. And what would happen is when they would take out the pot-bellied stoves and they'd put in another kind of heat, the pot-bellied stoves would have a pipe that went up, almost to the top of the ceiling, and then it would make a right turn and go out.
Yeah.
So there'd be a hole there. So when they take the pot-bellied stoves out, there'd be a hole up there. And they made something to cover that hole. Probably came from the heating company. And it
Hmm.
usually had a picture on it. Sometimes it'd be a painting of a mountain or something. And I remember looking up one of the first times I remember going to church, and there was that picture of Jesus again, from
The
the
same one.
Bible, the same one, which is
Wow.
was very popular in those days, right?
Yeah.
And so I remember thinking, wow, I guess in church you can, Jesus keeps us warm even without one of those stoves somehow. You
Yeah.
know, your tiny mind's trying to connect things that don't really
Yeah.
connect. But I remember thinking, wow, he's everywhere. You can feel the warmth, but we don't have one of those stoves, right?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I had this general positive feeling about him. We moved when I was young I was probably 9 or 10, 11 maybe. We moved to California, which was a radical culture shift, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was the new kid with a Southern accent and didn't really fit in. And, I didn't know, I'd never seen a tether ball or a soccer ball or,
Oh, wow.
what was popular in those days.
Yeah.
And, I didn't really fit in, but we started going to this little fundamental church, and a lot of people were moving to California. My dad moved out there to be part of the aircraft industry that was really
Okay.
growing in the early 60s because there
Yeah.
wasn't a lot of work, where we were. Well, anyway, I was kind of an outcast at school, but at church, there were a lot of outcasts. There were people who'd moved from other parts of the country,
Mm-hmm.
and they kind of congregated there. And how I came to Jesus, quote unquote, or he came to me,
Mm-hmm.
was I sort of knew he was real. And when I was real little, they wanted me to, I think it was a Methodist church, and they wanted to do some kind of confirmation. And I remember thinking, I don't really know what this is all about, and there was like pressure, to go along with the program, but I felt like if it wasn't sincere, I shouldn't go along with it. And so my parents and the pastor were kind of disappointed, but they were also kind of like uh, appreciative of the fact that I wanted whatever it was to be genuine. I just didn't go along with the program. You know what I
So
mean?
how old would you have been at that point?
Gosh, 9, just probably, 8 or 9, somewhere in there, pretty early
That's
on.
pretty young. That's pretty young though to take a stance like that, because normally at 9 years old you'll just do whatever just so you don't stick out, right? That's amazing that you're even thinking that way.
Well, it just didn't feel right, and
Yeah.
there wasn't a lot to do where I was. I was the youngest of 2 children, and I read a lot, and was interested in science and all that. It was the Cold War, and the Sputniks had flown over, and doggone it, we had to learn how to engineer things and all that sort of thing. So I was into all that even when I was little, and I just didn't understand, right? And
Right.
something didn't feel right. So yeah, I guess that's just part of how I was made. I guess it has to be real. Although Lord knows I had a long period in my life where it was faking it pretty good. But
Yeah.
anyway, so we wound up at this little church, and it was the bipolar God, the typical fundamentalist thing of God loves you, but he hates you because of sin, and
Yeah.
he can't be in your presence. But Jesus, stick figure little Jesus, laid his life down, and became a bridge to walk upon to
Right.
get to the real God. And later on, I found out he was the real God, but that's further on in my story
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
So there was one guy in the church. He was, I think he was a closet charismatic, even though this was a cessationist church, right? Because
Yeah.
he was a little too happy compared to everybody else.
Right.
And the love of God just kind of radiated through him. And he had the eyes that were kind of like, my mom and that picture of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, I said, whatever he has, I want that, And so I believed. And um, the first few months of that, just opening the Bible was alive, and it was vibrant, and it was real, and it was like uh, colors were brighter. I felt the presence of God. It was
Hmm.
amazing. And then as I got more educated
Yeah. Yeah.
and learned about the bipolar nature of God, and there was this
Yeah.
other side, and anyway, all this, I became more conflicted and uh, I don't know, less approving of myself. Many
Hmm.
people have had this experience where they love Jesus, but somehow the church makes us feel bad sometimes because the love of God is not the headline of the gospel in the church.
Right.
It's the love of God and the wrath of God, and God has two natures. He's your judge primarily, but you could make him your father if you said the magic prayer. You could get
Right.
Jesus to come from out of you to in you, and from being distant and angry to being near and loving. And it all shifted from just beholding God and the goodness of God and just
Hmm.
receiving that to performance. And anyway, I loved a challenge. And anyway, if you were serious about God in the fundamental church, many people can relate to this, I'm sure. There was only two paths. If you could sing and you're musical, you're probably going to do worship stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you weren't, then you were either a pastor or a missionary.
Yeah.
And we had some missionaries, and they had some pretty tough experiences. So I didn't think I was up for that. So that left being a pastor. So I went to Bible college. And now what's interesting, I hope others can relate to this, is up to that point when I was a child, and I'm talking, as old as I can remember, I was very interested in technology and, you know, chemistry, biology, electronics. I built little radios and things when I was a kid, and I did. Everybody had a chemistry set back then.
Yeah.
And I was headed towards a career in technology, but um, this seemed to be, if you were going to be serious about God, this is what you did, right? So
Yeah.
I went to Bible college and became a pastor.
And
But
that was a Baptist Bible college, correct?
right, right,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
and the um, it was all I knew, right? And so I did well at that, and then I'd go out on the weekends and speak and stuff. Lord help me for what I taught back then.
Yeah.
but, but anyway, I played the part pretty well,
Yeah.
and I got hired by a big church at our denomination right out of um, college and moved back east. And I thought, man, I'm on my way. I got a good gig here, and a good career. And it was this would have been the mid '70s, and they were having riots and things back east. And um, it's funny. I grew up in the South, and I lived in Southern California, but I had never really encountered racism. And so the my parents weren't really that way. They were very, accepting and loving. And
Hmm.
so anyway, I'll just make it short that I encountered some racism at this church, and
Hmm.
it disillusioned me. And there's basically this unwritten rule that we didn't have black or brown people north of a certain line, and
Wow.
I didn't get the memo, so I tried to bring some people. And anyway, it became very disillusioned. I said, well, Lord, I don't know much, but this doesn't feel like you, so I quit. And then I'm like,
Yeah.
well, uh, I guess I gave that a try. Now I got to make a living. So I kind of started gravitating back towards technology. And all along the way, God would go out of his way. I'd
Hmm.
say one of my takeaways from my life experience on that is when you give up, often is when God meets you.
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
like Peter when you're like, I'm going to go fishing and I'm done with this, and
Yeah.
I denied him, and it's over, and then Jesus comes and expresses his love in such a sincere and pure and amazing way that it draws you back into relationship.
Yes.
And that was my that was my experience. And so I started in technology, but I was always involved in church. And so I started out a cessationist, and I didn't believe God did any of those. You were asking about the mysticism and charismatic. I started out, I would say, everybody starts out as a mystic in their relationship with Jesus,
Yeah.
but you get educated out of it. And what do we mean by mystic? Well, we just mean um, God supernaturally permeates the physical reality with his spiritual presence in such a
Mm.
way that we become aware of him.
Yes.
And sometimes that involves uh, feelings of ecstatic joy. Sometimes it involves
Yes.
visions. Sometimes it involves dreams. And people say, well, we don't need that mysticism. And they don't distinguish between Christian mysticism and pagan mysticism, right?
Right.
But we're not saying that we're open to anything that blows by in the spiritual realm, but we're focused on Jesus, who is
Mm-hmm.
faithful to lead us and guide us into all truth, right?
Come on. Yeah.
And so um, mystically, we start out that way. We get educated out of it, and then as a cessationist, we even develop doctrines to make up for our lack of supernatural experience
Right.
by just saying it all went away, right?
Yeah.
And so I had a friend though who I worked with. This is the grace of God, and we were repairing these some computer equipment. Was my first job in the industry, and he had gotten saved just reading the Bible. He didn't have any baggage from church, and
Wow.
and so he was like, "Hey, I've been going to this place called Calvary Chapel. It's really cool. They got great music. You want to come check it out?" So I
Mm-hmm.
went there, and it was fantastic music because they could have guitars and drums. I mean, like we didn't
Yeah.
allow any of that in my denomination.
Yeah.
And we heard a lot of the young, Chuck Smith and a lot of the young pastors at that time, and a lot of the young, Lonnie Frisbee and all these different young pastors. And I even ran into a guy from high school. It was so funny, who was, kind of a critic of me being a believer back in the day. And he was there, and we ran into each other in the lobby. And I'm like, "What are you doing here?" And he goes, "Man, what can I say? The love of God."
Wow.
And it was a beautiful moment because he says, "I used to make fun of you, but I kind of thought it was cool that you would take the heat. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
I was a pretty pharisaical, and I wasn't doing anything much for the right reasons. It was all a mixture. But um, anyway, God's so faithful, and He made that connection. And so anyway, the first miracles and encounters with Holy Spirit from a charismatic standpoint were this was like the mid '70s, so it was like towards the middle to tail end of the Jesus movement.
Yeah. Yeah.
After Big Calvary was already built down there, and it was you definitely felt something. And me and my friend, we worked the phones, the prayer line between like midnight and 5 a.m. a couple times a month. And boy, Southern California, you can imagine the calls you would get
Yeah.
that time of night.
Yeah.
So we learned to pray in ways that we were like, I don't know what's going on, but we got to pray about this. So anyway, so then we gravitated over to the Vineyard, when Wimber
Yeah.
was still there, and saw healings and things. And then spent some time in a small charismatic church in Northern California, and then we wound up, uh, connecting with Bethel and
Mm-hmm.
Randy Clark's ministry a little bit, with his long seminars he does on healing, things like
Yeah.
that. And there's some folks at Bethel that were just really kind to me. At that point, I had spent many years in technology and had a lot of stress from, real kind of high demanding jobs, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, was, going through some things spiritually. My life had bottomed out, and um, I got, I lost everything, became a single parent for a while,
Wow.
and uh, then I met a wonderful woman, and she loved me back to healing, and we've been, in fact, this month is 20 years, and
Wow. Congratulations.
yeah, thank you. And we began to go wherever we felt the presence of God. We had a group of friends that were just like, "Hey, this is going on. Let's go there. This is going on. Let's go there." And
Yeah.
we had a home group for a while, and then we ran into uh, John Crowder, and he and a friend were starting a church in Santa Cruz.
Mm-hmm.
So me and another couple, we were pastors of that for probably 5, 6 years, something like that.
So how
And
long ago was that now?
that started around 2009, and then we went to about 2014, and then we moved up to Portland for a while to be part of Cana New Wine Seminary,
Yeah.
and my wife and I were kind of pastors at that for 2 years, 14 and
Mm-hmm.
15, and then we've been doing various things online, and the last couple of years we've been teaching at uh, Deb Alexander's School of the Kingdom and the Alumni. We teach the Alumni, and anyway, so along the way, I would say, when was this? About 2011, we made a list of people we wanted to have in Santa Cruz,
Mm-hmm.
and that included, Francois, Baxter Kruger, Steve
Yeah.
McVeigh, Paul Young, and I'd met Paul Young about 2007 through a mutual friend, and kind of it was right after the Shack had come out, and kind of knew him for some time, and he would be at a lot of the places we would go. Anyway, so we helped Francois do his first USA tour back around 2011,
Oh, wow.
and um, I, the Lord impressed upon me it was important for him to meet Baxter Kruger, so we connected with Baxter. Also, he and I had a mutual friend, and started going to things that he was doing, and
Mm-hmm.
and Paul Young were doing up in Portland, and so anyway, we've been kind of tracking with them, and they've become, you know, John and Baxter and uh, Paul and other people have become like fixtures in my life, and
Yeah.
really learned a lot from them, and I really appreciate them. So John and Baxter and I do some things together from time to time, and John or Paul, no, Baxter. Baxter does a men's meeting once a year, and
Yeah.
he started to have John into that and things. So anyway, we've been on this journey of going from a very exclusive, bipolar, non-charismatic or mystical God
Yeah.
to um, being more open to seeing God as much more inclusive
Mm-hmm.
of all people, and also working out. We never really arrive I forget who the quote is from, but it talks about, this is Capon. He says, it's theology is not a precise science. It's more like we toss metaphors at a mystery,
Yes.
and hope for the best.
Yeah.
And we're all kind of realizing the general trend would be God is better than when we first began, right?
Yes.
And so that's kind of it in a nutshell. And I don't know if you have any questions from there.
Oh, I mean, a million questions raised. You mentioned, I love your story. I love hearing people's stories. I mean, I think the testimony is important. They overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. It's
Yeah,
important to hear people's stories and, to see where you came from. And I love the fact that you've experienced so many different streams and things that some of us have only read about. I mean, I've never been in a Lonnie Frisbee meeting, but here you are talking about them. And, I just love that stuff. But you had mentioned bipolar God. If we could go there for a minute, I heard you say recently, and I don't remember exactly where it was, but I was watching something and you said Jesus is not a separate God.
hmm,
And you talked about John 14:9, where it says, whoever has seen me has seen the Father. And
right.
over the last 5 years, I've really been unpacking all that. And it's unbelievable how much I used to believe without actually knowing I was believing it. If somebody came to me and said, well, you're splitting God on the cross by teaching what you're teaching, I didn't see that I was doing that. But now that I'm on the other side and I've been exposed to this beautiful teaching of other options other than penal substitutionary atonement, and it just, not only is it beautiful and it just makes my heart sing, but it also makes sense. Like, it's funny how some of the ways I used to think, I guess I never question it, so that's why I never realized how ridiculous it was. No offense to anybody that's listening, but if you
Yeah,
could unpack that, because that's a huge thing. If we have a Father in heaven that has to take a pound of flesh out of his son so he's not mad anymore, that's a much different Father than somebody who's in Christ reconciling the world to himself. So
yeah,
can you unpack that a little bit?
yeah. I have a whole series I do on what is the gospel,
Yeah.
on GAN. It's about 6 sessions. And I'll cover a little bit of that. But I'd say the problem is we're handed a gospel when we believe, and we assume that it's the gospel. It's the
Right.
faithful representation of the gospel,
Hmm.
and we're not encouraged to really go back and examine that very often. We're
Right.
often we're just told that's how it is, and so many people confuse atonement theory with the gospel. And the
Yes.
most popular atonement theory is penal substitution.
Hmm.
Many are not aware that there are other theories of atonement.
Yes.
That, for example, Christus Victor,
Yes.
or ransom theory. There's a few books written on that, on um, the different theories, and we did a session on that for Dub's school. But here's what I would say is the penal substitution is one explanation of the cross,
Hmm.
a fairly recent one when you look at historically when that appeared, right, through
Right.
through Anselm and some other things. But it has some problems. One of the problems is it has an Arian view of God. Arius was the author of one of the early heresies in the church, and Athanasius and others fought that, and out of it came the Nicene Creed.
Hmm.
One of the key phrases from the Nicene Creed is homousios to patre, which is same essence as the Father. The
Yes.
problem with the gospel we were handed, which is in pictorial form in the Four Spiritual Laws tract. In the Four Spiritual Laws tract, you have this big gap separating you and God.
Yeah.
And God is this nameless, faceless omni-being on the other side who's primarily a judge by nature. And you're over here. And Jesus, the little stick-figured Jesus, God bless him, lays down his life, and you walk across him to get to the real God.
Yes.
The only problem with this is literally one of the oldest heresies in pictorial form. But that's how we visualize it.
And it's on almost every track you see. Well, not every,
Yeah.
but that's exaggeration. Yes. But I mean, we've all seen those tracks, right?
Right. So what's the problem with that picture? Well, one, it contradicts John 1, which is, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God.
Yes.
It contradicts John 14. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. Right? It contradicts all the declarations of Jesus. Before Abraham was, I am. You see, Jesus is not a little stick figure you walk upon to get to the real God. Jesus is God.
Yes.
He's the creator. He's one with the Father. He says in John 10:30, I and my Father are one. There's nothing he does that he doesn't see the Father doing.
Yes.
No one, Jesus didn't come to change the Father's mind about you. He came to change your mind about the Father.
Yes.
He says the Father, no one comes to me unless the Father draws him. The Father's already involved in the deal. They're one. So one of the problems with that gospel we inherited, other than it being literally outright old heresy, is that it presents the Father as something other than Jesus. It splits the Trinity. You see, if one member of the Trinity has to kill the other member of the Trinity to be okay with you, then they're not one, are they? Because
no, it's a split personality, really.
Yeah, really. Yeah, and some of that goes back to paganism. That's a lot. But I would, if someone's interested in that, I would encourage them to read On the Incarnation by Athanasius.
Yes.
And Against the Heresies by Athanasius, and anything by Irenaeus, any of those early guys, Gregory of Nyssa. They had an understanding. We were told this was the Cadillac of theology we were given, and
yes,
and it was just the best, but we ignored the early church fathers, right? And so God is one. He does nothing as a judge he would do as a father.
Yes.
George MacDonald says. He says, good souls many will one day be horrified at what they now believe about God. So part of my story that I shared with you is God faithfully, patiently showing me he was better than the theology that I had been educated in.
Yes.
And it's so refreshing to go places now where you don't have to, it doesn't bring you down, because it's, you know what I'm saying? Like, you're enjoying God, you're feeling Holy Spirit, and you go somewhere and they tell you about, well, but you got to do this and you got to do that, and God's angry with you about that, and all of that stuff. And the problem with this, you hear people say, well, God's love, but he's also fear.
Yeah, it's like they can't. Yes, yeah. If I talk to people all the time, and we talk, and I'm like, dude, he's love. Yes, but he's also just. It's almost like they have to flip this in there, like somehow they're opposing views or something, or opposing characteristics.
Yeah, it's dualism, which we inherited from the time of the pagans. Is that there's Zeus, right? He's an angry, distant god, and occasionally he throws a lightning bolt. Or he's Janus, the Roman god. He's justice, but he's mercy. He's this, he's that. Literally, that comes from paganism.
Wow.
Look up Janus, Janus, the Roman god, and if that doesn't sound like the father of Jesus you heard in most churches, you'll be shocked, because. Wow. And so literally it goes back to paganism, because most people don't realize, like, at the time the King James Bible was put together, the priests were not very educated. And so, for example, Shakespeare was around that time. He will, in one hand, talk about the grace of God,
Hmm.
and then the other he'll swear by Jove, which is to swear by the god Jupiter, right? And so this was all mixed together, and it's been handed down to us as this amalgam of paganism, Arianism, the Galatian bewitchment, uh, Gnosticism. That's the poisonous stew which passes as the gospel. But you
Right.
see, the gospel is the love of God. It's not the weakness of the gospel, it's the
Right.
strength of the gospel. The wrath of God is not the bipolar opposite of the love of God. The wrath of God is God's love on fire against everything that's not of love's kind in the world and in us.
Yes.
And it is a refining fire that will burn away everything that's not of love's kind. And it will
Yes.
feel like torment if all you have is your false self
Yes.
that doesn't know who you are, because that's what it's coming after. You know, uh, Thomas Merton talks about the fact that we have a true self that was made in the image of God,
Yeah.
and what God makes is good, and it's true, and it has the character of the fruit of the Spirit.
Hmm.
And then you have the false self, which is when we don't know that, and we've been infected with this false gospels. It's like we feel invisible and insignificant, so we begin to wrap ourselves with things to give us form and make us visible. This can
Right.
be religion, this can be accomplishments, this can be relationships or possessions or whatever. It's the things of this world, right? That
Hmm.
Jesus is not talking about are you drinking or partying when he talks about the world. He's talking about the world system that
Right.
works against God, and the world system is politics and religion are a marketplace of false identities that try to sell you something that you could wrap yourself in to feel significant, that is useful to them for their
Yeah.
purposes.
Right.
So politics and religion, the powers of this world that killed Jesus, they seek to use you and enslave you while giving a false sense of significance.
Hmm.
Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. So Jesus comes to untangle us from those false identities, and through
Yes.
the fiery love of God, burn those away until what's left is the precious metal of who we were really
That's
made to be,
beautiful.
you know? And so that's the gospel. That's just that we've had a weak gospel.
Yes.
And the core of the gospel is who Jesus is, what he accomplished, who we are in him, and how we view others in light of that good news. And
Yes.
we reduced it to God hates you, but he killed his own son so he could make magic glasses out of the blood of Jesus. So when he looks at you, he sees his son, not you.
Well,
And
yeah, and not only that, when he sees some of you, it's not
yeah,
even like it's
yeah,
it's you know the he came on the cross to save just a small portion of humanity. I mean, that's what we
right,
believed or thought, and it's I mean, he
right.
came. It's the world. It talks about the whole cosmos. I see it now as the cross was so much more victorious than I ever knew. And I just want to touch on something. You just mentioned what the gospel was, and you mentioned five or six things there.
Hmm.
Christ was the center of all that. Jesus was
Yes,
the center. And I saw one video you and John were on. I don't remember if it was you or John that said it, but it said that like how did you guys word that? It was something like good theology is centered in Christology. I think it
yes,
was something to that effect. And as
yeah,
I listen to you speak, all you're talking about is Jesus in the
yeah.
sense of he's the center of the whole thing. And it makes it, well, that's what he came for, to reveal who he really was, because we were missing it.
Yeah, and in the course of that, to reveal the Father, and that
Yes.
he and the Father are one. But yeah, Christology, we have very weak Christology in the church. That's why the
Hmm.
gospel hasn't been more effective,
Yeah.
because beholding Jesus, when we preach the gospel, Christ becomes the content of the communication.
Yes.
And he is lifted up. We behold him and we become what we behold. There's power in beholding Jesus. And
Yes.
we're not communicating a potentiality that depends on you. We're talking about a finished work that has been completed by Jesus. Karl Barth says Christ accomplishes the reality of our reconciliation with God, not its possibility.
Wow.
And the other problem with the gospel is that we've been inherited is that it's all pending. Yeah, sure, Jesus died for you, but it's in an escrow account somewhere, and you got to pull the trigger on it, or you got to put in a magic ATM code, and out
Yes.
comes a imputation certificate, right?
Yes.
But the gospel is not a transaction you completed, a theological ATM. The gospel is responding to a family plea to come home to the good Father's house where you were always a son and you always belonged and you always had a place at the table, you see.
Yes.
One's a relationship, the other's a transaction. And we love transactions. Religion loves transactions. Because then we get bragging rights. Well, I said the prayer right. I'm
Yes.
in and you're out. We want to be the guy that Jesus talked about. He went up to the temple, looks up into heaven and says, thank God I'm not like other men.
Yes.
And that's the identity, the false identity that religion sells you, is you be able to look up into heaven and say, thank God I'm not like other men. But you see, Jesus died for all. If he came after Peter, who denied him 3 times and
Yes.
cursed, will he not come after you?
Yes.
You see what I mean? He comes after those. He's the good shepherd. He leaves the 99, goes after the one who's lost.
Yes.
But see, we all think we need less shepherding than another guy. We think we need less grace than the other guy. See, the problem is not that the salvation of Jesus Christ, which is in his very person, does not apply to everyone. The problem is, do we believe that? You see what I mean?
Right.
We don't make it real. When you fall in love and you propose, when the bride says yes to the proposal, her saying yes does not create the love that sparked the proposal.
Yes.
It simply responds to the love that was already expressed, you see.
Yes.
Jesus has already expressed his love. If you ever doubt it, behold the tree, behold him upon the tree, having laid down his life for his friends. When he could have walked away in the garden as they were trying to arrest him, he went all the way to the cross, to death, to the grave, and back to demonstrate the love of God, you see. But here's the thing that will help clear up a lot of theology, is when you realize love does not control.
Right.
So love requires willing participation by both parties, or it's not love.
Right.
So getting saved is not changing God's mind about you. It's saying yes to willingly participating in the love that he's already showing you in Christ Jesus.
Thanks for tuning in for part 1 of my chat with Rod Williams. Make sure to check us out next week for part 2. You guys are gonna love it. You are amazing.
Thanks for listening to Jesus the Legend. If this episode spoke to your heart, please subscribe, like, and share it with someone who would be encouraged by the message. Be sure to tune in next time as we continue the conversation about the beauty of Jesus and how the gospel is even better than we could ever imagine.